So over the weekend, I got to travel to the first ever USA-based Sim Racing Expo down in Charlotte, North Carolina. Now, every fall, the expo is typically held in Germany with a massive turnout and booths full of all the latest and greatest sim racing gear. Now, this being my first ever Sim Expo had me curious, but also excited to see what manufacturers would show up and how the turnout would be with the attendees, given the fact that US is currently playing catch up in the sim racing world compared to Europe. So follow me along as I go through the booths and do a little recap of what I got to experience. There were definitely some surprises and almost zero letdowns. I mean, how could you be let down when you have so much stuff to see, let alone have the opportunity to try finally in the US? Now, PXN was the first booth I checked, but they had a nice simple booth with a couple of rigs set up paired with their wheels, wheelbases, and pedals. And next to the rig was a table showcasing all their wheels. I was actually surprised, honestly. They felt really amazing for the price and should definitely be on your list for entry price, but not entry feeling. Track Racer definitely had the most product unveilings with a lot of interesting stuff to try out. Their main attraction was probably the new MotoGP simulator that was crazy to look at. It was a challenge to try and decipher everything going on. The line was huge to try it out, so I can't really comment what it was like, but it definitely had some type of force feedback options on it. It had a butt kicker and some force feedbacks in the handlebars to separate from the old arcade style MotoGP setups that you would typically see if you were a kid. You did have the option to try it with a Pimax Dream Air, which took it to a whole new level. I mean, VR takes it to a different level in my opinion, especially for MotoGP setups. And what shocked me the most was actually the price, which ended up being relatively cheap for what it is, starting at $19.99. I was thinking at least $5K and up compared to typical sim rigs. They were also showing off their new 200 profile rig, which was hailed as their next evolution in sim rigs, upping the stiffness and rigidity along with easier adjustments to the wheelbase and pedals, making it great changing on the fly if you have friends and family trying out the sim. They were displaying their new Porsche GT3 and Aston Martin F1 rigs. The design and finish on them was really good, but I ended up not trying them just because that style of tubular rig just isn't my cup of tea, but the response from people trying them was really great. So if you're into Porsche GT3 or Aston Martin F1 fan and you want your rig to match your vibe, definitely give these a look. They were also showing their Hot Wheel rigs. They start at entry level and move up from there to more of a mid-tier rig, so kids can get excited when they grow with the rig and as they upgrade down the line. The last thing I got to take a sneak peek at was the new Airbus license rig. It looked to be able to accommodate joystick style controls along with yokes. It's all officially licensed and Airbus accurate down to the seats. No comment on that. Now, SRP was on my top 5 lists of stuff I have to try. I've heard how amazing their GTR pedals are, not just in design, but in feel. They take a really interesting design for braking force by using pneumatic pressure and springs instead of your typical spring and elastomer design. And the only thing that sucks after trying these pedals is trying to describe someone how different they feel in terms of repeatability and smoothness compared to the latter. And the customization options are endless, from the colors down to the face plates, down to the option to split the pedals or have an all-in-one pedal tray design. Fanatec was there and they had a nice booth going on. They had almost every SKU in their lineup on display, from entry level to the new high-end podium base and pedals. This was another booth that was hard to try out because of the line, but everyone loved the podium pedals and base. It was showcased on their F1 rig, which I don't understand why they have them on display at the expos for people to try out if it's not even an option to purchase. But checking out their new GT rig, I have to be honest, is not one of my favorite designs. I just don't like tubular rigs in general, but it actually wasn't as boaty as I thought it would be in person. It was actually a really slick setup with the triple monitors and everything else paired with it. They also showed their entry-level rig hooked up to a PlayStation 5 next to a little lounge, showing off the new iRacing arcade racer. Don't quote me on that though. Now, Flat Out Sim Racing is a Utah-based company showcasing one of their motion rigs available for booking or franchising. Now, I'm not one for motion rigs because I don't like the delay and the disconnect almost all of them have when you try them out, but theirs was actually super simple in the setup and was tuned down perfectly to where it actually complemented the driving and the rig motion, so it doesn't dominate your senses and take away from the experience. It was also shown on a spec rig, which I just recently heard really good things about. Their finishing is top notch and the design as well. DOF Reality had a booth showing their H series and P series motion rigs, also showing their new H4 4-axis rig, which can adapt to racing and flight motion along with a focus on affordability. This is all relatively speaking, of course, but the design looked really good and offered great motion. The staff was great to chat with, and I ended up having a really good combo with Mark from Get Your Game On if you've ever seen him on his YouTube channel checking out VR stuff. Pimax was also on my top 5 list. Their booth was paired with DOF Reality, and I couldn't wait to try the new Dream Air and Dream Air SC. I've recently gotten into VR and have only ever tried a Quest 3, and weight has always been a huge deterrent for me. After about 20 to 30 minutes, it becomes really uncomfortable, but to get to see and feel what it's like to have a headset that's only 170 grams, dual 4K OLED panels and display connection had me stoked, but also scared because I knew it was going to ruin VR headsets for me. And to no surprise, it did. Talking with Calvin, he ran me through all the questions and concerns with the headset. I didn't even realize I was trying the Slam version until he told me it was. I experienced no jitter in my time, and in my chat with Calvin, he said you have to remember that the firmware is only going to get better with Slam tracking down the road. So it looks like I know what version I'll be ordering at some point. Conspit had a really typical showing on one side of their booth, their wheelbases and wheels. I wasn't sure if they were showing off a new rig stand with LED lights or if it was just for the show, but they had their Formula style rig and their GT style rig going on all weekend long. But on the other side of their booth was a huge line. People waiting almost an hour to try probably the coolest display of tech I've ever seen in person, and that was their new projector and F1 cockpit setup. It was cool that they had a little poster up with the pricing on each of the items in the setup, putting this thing out of reach for basically everyone, but at the end of the day, this thing was slick and amazing to see in person. It'll probably set you back 40 to 50 grand all said and done, but you'll have the neighbors talking for months if you put this bad boy on display. I'm not sure what I like more in terms of immersion after seeing this setup though, VR or the projector setup. Now I don't play any sims that require shifters, but if you do, you've probably heard of BDH by this point. Their shifters are hands down the best, and they were showing their new H1 shifters along with their haptic feedback shifters on 2 different prototype rigs. Shifters had force feedback, letting you know if you were shifting too early or slipping a gear. But if I ever get into rally and NASCAR at some point, I'll definitely be going this route. I think I appreciate now how slick their shifters are without looking too loud on the rig, but also complimenting them. And I had a great time learning about the company and the journey the staff had coming all the way from the UK. Now, number 1 on my list was SimiCube. They have cemented themselves as the best in the games in terms of design, feel, function, and of course price, but I've been waiting so long to try an active pedal or a new SimiCube 3 wheelbase, and now I finally got the chance. All I've known in my sim racing journey is my trusty Ace Forte wheelbase and Invicta S pedals, which is more than anyone would ever need, but I just had to know what it was like. I had a bunch of questions and I got to chat with the staff. At first I thought they were going to be a little standoffish and intimidating to talk to, but they were legitimately the happiest and most genuinely inviting people to talk to. They answered everyone's question and gave demonstrations on the tech if needed. SimiCube was also sharing their booth with a company called Driven Dynamics. It's a new top-down motion sim company showcasing one of the craziest motion rigs I've ever got to try, and I was truly blown away. They've designed everything and every aspect of the rig and had it paired up with the latest offerings from SimiCube to make it for one of the most immersive and precise rigs at the show. Their biggest separating feature is the latency though. Motion rigs tend to have an inherent latency to what you see on the screen to what the motion rig carries out in real time, which can make it feel fake and sometimes cause motion sickness, but not on these rigs. The motion matches the inputs and makes for one of the most realistic feeling motion rigs I've ever tried. These rigs have the active pedals and seatbelt tensioners, both the 2 things I wanted to try the most, and it made me walk away to the food court area to sit alone and question life, essentially, like I was Steven Glansberg or something. Ace had a great booth with a great staff. I mean, this one is near and dear to me because I've been rocking with Ace since day 1, and I've watched them grow and evolve as a company, which has been cool to watch. I mean, seeing all their new products and the direction they are taking is always interesting. The displays were great, and I really do love how they have products that don't need to be replaced when you want to upgrade down the road. You can upgrade the components from the wheels to brake parts that you can start at the very entry level with Initium and go all the way up to the Thorpe 2 hydraulics whenever you're ready. And it's as easy as swapping out the modules. Everyone loved that and loved their different offerings, which were showed on their new low price entry level rigs. I got to try them out and I would realize I would be totally happy with these in terms of function and style. I mean, they easily handled the Invicta wheelbase along with their Thorpe 2 pedals. The displays were super cool and the staff loved helping out everyone that had questions or wanted to hop on the rigs, so well done Ace. I expected nothing else. Sim Magic pulled up in a cool trailer setup with some rigs showcasing what everyone wanted to see, their new Zeus wheel lineup with Magic Dock. The displays themselves were cool and allowed you to check out the wheel and swap the dock in and out between the wheels. It did take about 15 seconds for the screen to finish loading, but once it did, it was a pretty cool idea to see actually executed and functional finally. The Formula wheel felt really good with a high-end feel, but not necessarily premium, if that makes sense. The price ends up making these wheels so hard to beat though. That's kind of what Sim Magic is all about. The wheels coupled and paired with the new Evo bases was a really great experience. One question I was asking myself before I got to the expo was which wheelbase and pedals are the best? And between Sim Magic, Ace and SimiCube 3 base, I would say it's so hard to say one is better than the other if it's going to be subjective, and it's always somewhat subjective in the end. Although they all felt great, I would still give the slight edge to SimiCube 3, but you're paying for a much higher price for that feeling, and you can only tell that difference when you're able to try one right after the other, which I was able to do obviously at the expo. Houstonvelt had the cleanest, simplest, and most interesting booth, showing off their new Houstonvelt one wheel and display dash button box, which was just a functioning prototype at this point. They also had their old faithful lineup of sprint pedals on display. They had those two rigs showing off all of those products together, and I just loved it. There's just something about this wheel that has me interested in wanting to get one. It's so light, but also super rigid somehow. I don't get it. It has the form that would make it great for a VR wheel with a button layout that lends itself to only having to use your thumbs. Everything was in reach and minimal hand movement was required to reach everything, and it was all for $4.99. That seems like a really good value to me. The display dash button box was crazy to see in person. It had the screen built in, obviously, which might be a little counterintuitive if you're constantly having to glance over, but I'm sure you could just use it for the information like relatives or track maps that you don't want taking up space on your monitor or wheel that are already have a dash showing more of that car info that you need. VRS kept it very VRS for a booth setup. They had some symmetry and minimalism on display while showing off their wheelbases pedals, and at the center were their new VRS 2 pedals. They even had some coaching going on, which I thought looked pretty cool, especially for an expo, but the new pedals were definitely the star of the show. They look to have some sort of dampening system and haptics built in natively. Apparently these features will be backwards compatible with the VRS 1, which is great news for the people already with a set of the original pedals. Now, typically I save the best for last, but I can't really say this booth was the best by any means, but was definitely the most interesting and inspiring. It's by a one-man band and it's called Race Day. Now, Race Day is a company showcasing their prototype Formula and GT rigs. Now, I love the bespoke futuristic style rigs that you just don't see very often in a space crowded with boring rectangular boxes from basically every manufacturer. These rigs look like they came down from the clouds and were dropped off by sim racers for another planet. I had a really great combo with Race Day and was actually very inspired to learn that they just dropped everything and started this company on an idea. I really think that if he sticks it out, he can make a splash and make something happen in the sim racing world. So please check out their socials and website and show some support for someone just trying to make a splash in the industry. So that wraps up the expo for me. I hope you made it to the end and you can tell the sim racing is a pretty good place in the US, and from this point on, it's probably only going to get better.